Roy, could you hold the baby for me? Wow, really? Do you think I can do it? Nervously requested by my sister, my husband carefully picked up the baby. Today we were celebrating the birth of my sister's child. Many relatives brought gifts for the baby, joining us to celebrate the occasion. Holding the baby, my husband was seemingly moved by its smallness and cuteness, and he couldn't help but express it. Oh, she's really adorable. I wish I could have one of my own soon. Saying so, he looked at me with a weary smile and murmured. Quick as a whip, I teased him. What are you talking about, Roy? You're always so good at cracking jokes. Your own child is right in front of you. At my words, everyone at the event fell silent. What are you saying? You must be joking too. Seeing my husband flustered, I pressed on. The mood quickly soured, but when I revealed the truth, it was clear that everyone was stunned. My name is Kristen. After graduating from college, I worked as an office clerk at a typical company. As I got used to the job, I was invited to a mixer organized by a coworker, where I met the man who would become my husband, Roy. He was a year older than me and apparently worked in the general affairs department of a major company nearby. Roy and I shared a hobby of traveling abroad, and we hit it off discussing the countries we had visited, exchanging contact information quickly. Afterward, Roy frequently asked me out for meals, and our relationship naturally began. A few years later, he proposed, and we got married. At my husband's request, I quit my job upon marrying to devote myself to being a full-time homemaker. Around this time, Roy was transferred to the always busy sales department, as rumored. Though expected, he began working overtime daily, coming home late, and was often called in by his boss even on weekends. Neither of us said it, but we resigned ourselves to this as it was his job. The time we used to spend traveling together on weekends was no longer available, and 3 years into our marriage, we were still not blessed with children. By the way, I have a half-sister. Her name is Holly. My parents divorced when I was still in elementary school. The usual differences in values were the reason. My mother had graduated from a prestigious university and worked in a prime department of a large corporation. She earned well and wanted to continue working after marriage, but my father staunchly refused. With a typical classic value, he believed it was natural for women to stay home, support their husbands, and raise children. After my birth, my mother complied with my father's demands, but as I grew and became less dependent, she wished to return to work. Naturally, my father was vehemently opposed. Neither yielded, and eventually, they divorced, with my father taking custody of me. A few years later, when I was in middle school, my dad remarried. My stepmother's name was Emily, and she was a waitress at a club my father frequented. She wasn't bad-looking but had a somewhat cold demeanor and didn't make much effort to connect with me. A year after their marriage, my sister Holly was born. My father and Emily were thrilled, spoiling Holly at every opportunity. Whenever Holly was in a bad mood and wouldn't stop crying, they'd buy her the toy she wanted or let her skip school to go to the amusement park if she asked. On the other hand, they wouldn't even pay for my high school tuition, telling me to figure it out yourself. I worked part-time every day to afford my tuition. Moreover, Emily would make lavish, homemade meals for Holly every day but told me, "You're not family," deliberately giving me leftovers or plain meals. Enduring such harsh treatment was only possible because of the occasional visits with my biological mother. Since my father had custody, I couldn't live with my mother, but I was allowed to see her, and that was my salvation. Returning to my story, 3 years after I married, to my surprise, it was Holly who had a child first. Her partner was a college classmate she had been dating. They decided to have what you'd call a shotgun wedding. When I heard this news, I felt quite frustrated internally and couldn't genuinely celebrate the announcement. However, Holly is still my half-sister, and we share the same blood. When Holly and her classmate came to our house to announce it, I congratulated her. "Holly, I was surprised when I heard, but congratulations on your marriage and pregnancy. Your partner seems like a very kind person, I'm relieved. Morning sickness and the like might be tough, but if there's anything I can do, just call me anytime. I offered these caring words with a smile from the bottom of my heart. But Holly didn't thank me, she just smirked at me. Holly, what's wrong? Sis, how old are you this year? I'm turning 34, but why do you ask? Because, sis, it's just too sad. You're such an old lady and still don't have even one child. How does it feel to be overtaken by your much younger and cuter sister? Holly's mocking laugh made my head go blank and my mouth hung open. Oh, I guess I don't need to ask. You're looking so frustrated and pitiful right now. Not being able to have kids must feel like you're finished as a woman. Well, I'm going ahead of you. Hearing Holly's words, my father, Emily, and even Holly's partner chuckled. Indeed. It's strange that you haven't had a child after 3 years of marriage. Is there something wrong? Maybe. You should probably hurry to the hospital. Excuse me, I have to leave. I couldn't bear to stay any longer and quickly left the room. Rushing home, the moment I was alone, tears streamed down my face. Not being able to have children was something I had always been sensitive about. I never imagined it would be exposed in front of everyone like this. That night, unusually, my husband Roy came home before midnight, and I decided to talk to him. Lately, it had become normal for Roy to come home in the morning, returning home just for a bath and a change of clothes. He mostly ate out, and we no longer ate together at home. Today, I went home to congratulate Holly on her pregnancy, and guess what she said? She said I'm finished as a woman. It was really the worst thing someone said. I regret going there. I hoped my husband would offer some comforting words. However, the response I received was an unexpected blow. I think Holly has a point. What? Just because only women can have babies, it's like the happiness of a woman has always been linked to childbirth. So, you're just jealous of Holly for getting pregnant, right? Roy seemed to think this was self-evident, stating it matter-of-factly. Wait, Roy, do you really think that? Is it because you think there's something wrong with me that I can't get pregnant? I confronted my husband emotionally. It's not just my fault that we can't have kids. Mostly, it's because you're always coming home in the morning, so we don't get enough time together, right? What? You're making it sound like it's my fault. The late nights are a recent thing. You know better than anyone that I used to come home earlier when we first got married. We had our time together. And yet, we still didn't have kids, so it must be your fault. Roy defensively implied that the fault was entirely mine, completely absolving himself. In the end, Holly is just better at being a woman than you are. Shocked by his words, I stopped speaking to him for a while. Feeling the tension, Roy began to spend even less time at home, and the gap between us grew deeper. Several months later, Holly safely delivered a baby girl. Holly's health improved considerably, and a baby shower that had been planned for a while was set to take place. My parents, relatives, and Roy's parents all brought gifts and attended. Holly's baby was so adorable that everyone present was utterly charmed. Roy, could you hold the baby for me? Wow, really? Do you think I can do it? Nervously requested by Holly, Roy hesitantly picked up the baby. Moved by its smallness and cuteness, he couldn't help but express it. Oh, she's really adorable. I wish I could have one of my own soon. Saying so, he looked at me with a weary smile and murmured. What are you talking about, Roy? You're always so good at cracking jokes. You're holding your own child right now. At my words, everyone at the event fell silent. What are you saying? There's no way this child could be mine. Seeing my husband flustered, I pressed on. What if I told you, this child is the result of an affair between my husband and my sister? Did you all really not know? I have solid proof. The statement that I had proof made everyone freeze on the spot. Cut it out. This is absurd. You're saying that Holly and I had an affair? That's impossible. Yeah, sis. Roy's right, that's impossible. And what proof are you talking about? You're just making this up because you're jealous I had a child before you. Roy and Holly frantically denied the affair, but their desperation made them seem even more suspicious, and the relatives began to murmur. The atmosphere turned from joyful to tense, and I slammed the supposed proof onto the table. I had been suspicious of Roy's late returns and frequent early mornings, so I hired a detective to track him. The results were as black as I feared. The photos from the detective clearly showed Roy and, shockingly, Holly entering and leaving a hotel together. According to the detective, their affair had been going on for 2 years, and Roy was still lying about work to meet Holly. Seeing the photos, everyone's face turned pale. Roy and Holly, apparently not expecting that I had actual proof of their affair, were speechless, their mouths agape. Then, a relative spoke up. How could you do something so outrageous? Do you understand what this means? What do you mean? Why are you so upset? Obviously, because your ridiculous affair is messing up our lives. Filled with anger, a relative confronted Roy, who began to look fearful as he sensed the seriousness of the situation. Looking around, he saw that most of the relatives were glaring at him and Holly, who seemed to have noticed this as well and was slightly trembling. It was understandable for the relatives to be furious. In fact, soon after my mother divorced, she quit her job and started her own business. Being passionate about her work, she quickly grew her company into a major corporation that represented our local area. Now handling a broad range of businesses, my mother's company had dealings with nearly all local companies. Because of this, many relatives had received work or financial assistance from my mother's company and benefited in some way. Thus, Roy and Holly making an enemy of me. That meant incurring the wrath of the CEO, my mother. Most of our relatives lived relatively prosperous lives thanks to my mother's success. Roy and Holly's affair threatened to disrupt their comfortable lifestyles, so naturally, they couldn't overlook what the two had done. Amidst relatives worrying about their own futures, Holly's in-laws were quietly furious. Reaching their limit, despite the murmuring of the relatives, Holly's father-in-law suddenly shouted, "Were you deceiving us all along? You shameless woman!" Even Holly flinched under the fierce gaze of her in-laws. I didn't mean to deceive anyone. Holly started making excuses and showing tears, but her in-laws were still visibly angry and continued to berate her. Holly's father-in-law was a key executive at a major company run by my father-in-law. Upon discovering Holly's deception, he began talking about reconsidering their future business relations. Hearing this, Holly's in-laws panicked. They apologized, trying to earn forgiveness. They even forced Roy to prostrate himself. Roy, pale-faced and trembling, apologized while bowing deeply, "I am terribly sorry." Despite the entire family bowing, Holly's in-laws were still not satisfied. Then, previously silent, Holly suddenly spoke up. "Well, it's all come out even though I've been hiding it. But it can't be helped. Sis, you don't mind if I take Roy, do you?" With a smile, Holly hugged Roy's arm. "Right? Roy would be happier with a younger and cuter wife like me at home instead of an old lady like you, right?" "Maybe, but..." Roy responded in a sweet voice, not clearly rejecting her but also not committing. Which seemed to annoy the stepmother, who quickly jumped in to support Holly. "That's right. Holly has a point. How could you hesitate to have such a cute and wonderful girl as your wife? She's perfect, already has a child, and she loves you. What's wrong with being with someone you love?" The stepmother made excuses to defend Holly. "How funny. Classic Emily. Blood really is thicker, huh? Even the tendency to easily have an affair runs in the family." "What did you just say?" I quickly showed a photo. It depicted the stepmother meeting a young man at a bar, hidden from my father. In the photo, the stepmother was smiling at the man in a way she had never shown my father, even holding the young man's hand. "What's this? Where did you secretly take this?" Wondering if she was caught, Emily suddenly tried to destroy the evidence by snatching the photo from my hands. "It's fine, you can have that one. I've got plenty more where that came from." I pulled a thick brown envelope from my bag, took out other incriminating photos and scattered them on the spot. The photos of Emily's infidelity fluttered to the floor. Dad picked up one from the floor, his hands trembling, and then crumpled the photo and threw it at Emily. "Who is this man?" "It was just a coincidence. I was at a bar with a friend and he happened to be sitting next to us." "You just happened to go to a hotel with a man you meet by chance?" Dad picked up another photo, glaring at Emily. In that photo, Emily was seen leaving a hotel, arm in arm and looking happy, with the man from the previous photo. Emily, realizing her excuses were futile, sighed deeply and shut her mouth. "Your silence means you admit to the affair, doesn't it? How long have you been deceiving me?" "How long?" "I forgot when it started. If you never noticed my affairs over the years, it just shows you weren't interested in me." "What did you say?" Dad, enraged by her defiant attitude. "I've been working hard for the sake of our family all these years, and this is how you repay me." "Fine, I understand. We're getting divorced today." The word divorce drained the color from Emily's face. She probably thought Dad would never actually bring up divorce, no matter her infidelities. "Wait, just wait a minute, it was just an affair. It wasn't serious, so why does it have to lead to divorce? Why don't we sit down and think it over? If it wasn't serious, why have you continued to cheat all these years? You just said yourself, what's wrong with being with someone you love? I'm offering you a divorce, go ahead and be with your lover." Emily was speechless at Dad's response. Meanwhile, Holly was still pressing Roy to marry her, seemingly oblivious to the uproar about the divorce. Seemingly reaching his limit with her indecision, he suddenly pulled his arm away. "Roy, you're too indecisive. I've even had your child. Just make up your mind and marry me now." "Holly, that hurts. Don't pull on me like that." All right. I'll divorce Kristen and marry you, Holly. So please, don't be mad, okay?" It seemed Roy and Holly had made their decision. While my parents were causing a scene, the two were trying to sneak out of the house. I wasn't about to let them leave without a word. "Where do you two think you're going? You were just talking about divorcing me. Are you off to the city hall to get the divorce papers?" I approached them with a mocking smile. "Well, I couldn't be happier to get rid of such a husband. But what will you do now? Holly just had a baby and can't work, and by the way, Roy, isn't your company in quite a bit of trouble? I'm really concerned." The two stopped in their tracks at the door as they heard my words. "Stop saying ridiculous things about my company. I'm not joking around. I know how much you make every month. Since our marriage, not only received no raise, but you've also missed out on bonuses. In fact, Roy's company had been struggling for years, and rumors of bankruptcy were circulating in the industry. As the salary suggested, it was likely true, and it was only a matter of time before Roy was laid off. Is what my sister's saying true?" Holly suddenly let go of Roy's arm, her face contorting. Roy couldn't meet her eyes, knowing too well about the bankruptcy rumors, and simply nodded. "Really? So all the promises about buying me designer goods and taking me on lots of trips abroad were all lies?" "No, it's not that they were lies, but right now, things are just a bit tight." Faced with the harsh reality that she couldn't indulge in luxuries anymore, Holly burst into loud tears, suddenly not wanting to believe it and lashing out at Roy. Roy, not knowing what else to do, simply kept apologizing. Thus, the baby shower ended in chaos. A few weeks later, my divorce with Roy was finalized. And I successfully secured a substantial alimony. It later emerged that the child Holly had given birth to was neither Roy's nor her college classmates. It turned out the baby's blood type didn't match Roy's, prompting a DNA test that revealed the child was fathered by a completely different man. Apparently, Holly had been having affairs with multiple men, aiming to marry a classmate who appeared wealthy. As for Roy, she had approached him thinking his salary was good and merely used him for extra cash. Unsurprisingly, Holly ended up being sued for a significant amount of alimony by the classmate's family. Around the same time as our divorce, My father also finalized his divorce from Emily, kicking both her and Holly out of the house. While it was good to evict them, my father, who was completely inept at household chores, seemed quite lost living alone for the first time and would occasionally email me asking for housekeeping tips. As for Emily and Holly, they actually had the nerve to show up at my apartment asking for money to help with living expenses. Naturally, I turned them away with a "you're not family." That seemed to have hit them hard, as I haven't heard from them since. Following our divorce, as rumors had predicted, Roy's company went bankrupt. Despite frequenting job centers, his pride kept him from settling into a steady job, and his willingness to work gradually waned. Eventually, I heard through the grapevine that he had ended up living under a bridge along the riverbank. It was a shock to discover my ex-husband had become homeless, but it was a consequence of his own actions. As for me, my mother had previously invited me to work at her company, so post-divorce, I secured a job there without much difficulty. The compensation is quite good, and unlike my husband, I don't have to worry about living expenses. I can focus on office work at my mother's place, which makes it an ideal environment where I feel quite secure about my job. Adding to my happiness, I started dating a man I met at work and soon after received a marriage proposal. We got married. And shortly thereafter, I discovered I was pregnant. Our company is very supportive of women's maternity needs and reintegration into the workforce, so I can focus on parenting without any worries. Now, I am grateful to my mother and am fully committed to raising my child day by day.